Welcome to the Learning Experience Ops Show, where we talk about making learning better that's future ready. My name is Jason Gorman. I am the founder and CEO of Jackrabbit Learning Experience. Every conversation that I've had on this show keeps circling back to the same things about the state of the learning professions. Nobody knows what's happening next. I mean, we know that our world has already changed a lot. We know that it's still changing. And we're pretty sure that more is still coming. But what do we make of all that? I mean, nobody has an answer. People have answers, but nobody has the answer. And certainly nobody is willing to say that they have the answer. Today, I am very excited to be talking with my business partner at Jackrabbit Learning Experience, James Altman, about a survey that we recently ran. We asked learning professionals a pretty simple question. What skills do you believe will matter the most for the future of this work? James did 99.9% of the work on the survey and has spent time with leaders in different industries after the survey came out to unpack some of our findings and what a next action might be. I think this is the start of a longer conversation. It's certainly not the end of one, because we still don't have any definitive answers. But I do think it points to a few things that we should be paying closer attention to, things that could really shape how we think about the future of our own work. So it's been a little while since we did this, James. Welcome back to the show.
It has. I'm so glad to be back.
So as I said, you did the most work on this survey. So let me start with the big obvious question. Why did you do this? Well, what is the survey? Why did you do it? And why now?
Yeah, you set it up well, I think, when you started talking about people trying to have the answer. And I think that's what we're trying to do. It's a deep and perpetual question right now, kind of like, what will the future look like? So maybe one thing to talk about is that this didn't seek to answer stuff that we will see in 5 years or 10 years. It was like 3 at the most. Like, how do we wrap our arms around 36 months of time when you said it the other day, actually, major news as it relates to AI, which as it relates to learning, the learning profession and the work that we do, comes out every week, whether it's a new model in kind of the race for models or whether it's the adaptation or application of what some of this technology can do or build. So the implications are kind of constant. So the survey, in terms of why, was just like, we all know that our profession, our colleagues are thinking and working and struggling and trying things, and why not kind of talk to them at scale, I suppose is one way to put it. Like, we have tons of conversations, tons. I think our companies are really great at meeting with lots of people where they are and having just open, honest conversations through all of our various venues and convenings. But this was like, how can you talk to 197 people in the matter of a couple of weeks? And we did that. So I think that was part of the point. So that's a bit about why. And I started talking about what in terms of the 3 years. Like, we're asking them what skills they think are important. So rate each one of these skills on a scale of 0 to 5, 5 being very important to you in your job in the next 3 years. And we give them 9 skills. We spent a while trying to think about and validate with others what would be an appropriate set of skills. We did not want them to rate 29 skills, which, if you go to some taxonomies or competency frameworks, you'd end up having many, many skills. So we tried to get it to a very kind of manageable amount. And then there are kind of different areas of the survey asking them a little bit more about themselves, a little bit more about what they think gets in the way of their learning, et cetera. But that's kind of the overarching description of the survey. And why now? I think I got 75% of your questions answered.
I think so. I think so. You actually answered my follow-up too. I was going to ask, what were we actually asking people? And you just said what we're actually asking people. I do want to talk about the findings. I actually want to flag something that I really like about where the survey ended up in terms of the responses that we got. The mix of people that answered was pretty good. We had people from higher ed, corporate, we had consultants, we had people working in nonprofit settings, K-12, government. We had people who were senior in their career, more mid-career folks, and then some folks who were just getting started in their career. 6 different regions worldwide. So to me, this range is kind of a big part of the point of why we did this in general. I mean, it's a big part of why we say learning professionals instead of something narrower. So you and I have had this conversation about, do we call the people we're talking to learning professionals on this podcast and through this survey and in the AI forum that we run? And we have really landed on learning professionals. And so while we've had this conversation, we've never had it on tape. So maybe now's the time. So since you're the guest, I'm going to ask you first, why are we calling the people we're talking to learning professionals?
Yeah, I'll start with that. I do want to jump back to one of the other questions you said, which is, or not questions, but just observations in terms of the span of people that we had. That it was good. It was a lot of work because we were asking a lot of people around the world to fill this out, and in order to get that. So I'm just addressing kind of any potential questions, or maybe I'm actually raising a bunch of questions around the methodology, because this was really the first kind of professional survey, industry survey that Jackrabbit did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we learned a lot, and there's a lot more to do. I mean, we could do a whole episode on basically what we'd like to do better. And I'm sure we'll end with what's next. And that will definitely be one of the things that's next. We will do another survey and we will learn and improve from this. So I will comment a little bit about that, but I'm going to skip around. So then you said, why learning professional? And yes, you and I have debated it. I've also had many debates with people as I was thinking about this survey, thinking about how and where the venues.
Well, can I just ask a question? Why is it a debate?
Yeah.
Can just maybe we set that up. Yeah.
So I don't know that you can find learning professional out there. It's not a domain. It's not a title.
Right.
You don't become an associate learning professional, a mid-career, you don't, there's no title for that. What's interesting about discussing it with people that are in learning, and I'll lay out some categories or sectors as we've been calling them in learning. K-12 is obvious, right? Like in kindergarten through 12th grade, you are learning, you're in school. Generally, almost everybody you interact with as a student there, right, could easily be called a learning professional, from a teacher to administrator. And then higher ed, right? That's like just a continuation. But then after that, in many cases, not all cases, you kind of end up in corporate learning, and that's called L&D, or learning and development, has for some reason captured that title, even though it could have been learning and development words could apply to anything. And then there's then there's workforce development, which corporate is also part of the workforce, but it means this whole other set of thing and has all these other people that do all these various jobs. So I've been talking to all those people, and what's really interesting, it's actually a minority, and this is anecdotal, this is not kind of quantitative survey data, but anecdotally, when I talk to people and say, I'm surveying learning professionals and I'm trying to think about the future of learning professionals, there's a small portion that says, what's a learning professional? What do you mean by that? I kind of understand that you are one, you're running a learning experience design company, so I get that, but like, do you mean instructional designer? And before I kind of continue that conversation, the majority said, just start using learning professional in their responses to me. They go, well, when I think about kind of what learning professionals might need to do, I think about these kind of workflows and how, how AI will be impacting that, and how judgment will, really impact our kind of our understanding of the output of AI. And it's just natural. I do want to recognize, it's not only anecdotal, it is my network, right? So I'm already self-selecting and talking to a certain slice of people. So I think the debate is fascinating and worthwhile having. Here's maybe my or our opinion around it from what you and I have discussed. Is when I name K-12 teacher, right? You think of this role. Corporate L&D, like course instructional designer. Higher ed, like maybe learning strategists, right? Like there are all these different roles and titles. We have, I love making numbers up, right? We have 87% of our jobs are in common. Like we are thinking about what the learner needs. We're thinking about the learner's goals. We're thinking about the opportunities that come to the learner based on what they might learn, how they will use the information, their own kind of metacognitive processes. And probably the biggest distinction is worth making is child development and all of the things that they will go through, because a 3-year-old is very, very different than a 9-year-old, very, very different than a 16-year-old. So that's a big category. But if you take adult learning across the globe, um, there's more in common than not in terms of what people that are involved in that. So I like to say, from a learning professional standpoint, definition of that title, are you involved
Mm.
or help in the creation of learning experiences? And from that perspective, it's very broad, but it has a common goal. It's a common outcome. Are you working on creating some form of learning for other people, other adults? And once you have that, like I said, I think you have 87% overlap, just completely making up numbers, but that there's a lot in common. So I recently gathered, this is not a survey thing, but I'll just tell a side story. I recently gathered 14, including myself, so 13 other relatively senior learning professionals, but they were across K-12, corporate, workforce, association, management, all the places where most learning professionals end up landing in terms of sectors. And they're all in New York. It was a physical gathering, but they all pretty much agreed, like, we have a lot more in common than we don't. And this
Mhm.
is from the CLO of a major, I don't even know, Fortune 500 company, a big company,
Yeah.
down to someone that's doing teacher training,
Mhm.
kind of class by class in NYC public schools for the Department of Ed, or for a nonprofit that helps with the Department of Ed. So a fascinating array, but generally they agreed. A, they agreed on this kind of idea that learning professionals is a valid title, and B, that there's a lot more in common than there isn't. I said I would go back a little bit to the survey, like things I would like to improve in the survey. I'm just going to say one thing because you mentioned it very particularly, which is that we had early career professionals and late, middle and late. And one of the problems with the survey was that we asked for entry level professional, mid career professional, and senior career professional.
Mhm.
And I think the realization was that people really don't like to be called entry level. In some cases, we kind of saw in the data, based on the kind of following of the responses, that somebody had almost no kind of professional work experience, like basically just graduated college, had some internships and stuff, but still didn't call themselves entry level.
Yeah.
So I think using those kinds of labels where they might have connotations is dangerous, and not dangerous, but it's not the right way to do this survey. And I think we could have asked, how many years have you considered yourself a learning professional? Maybe
Mhm.
something like that could have given us a little bit more of a quantitative response, because then we would have gotten probably a lot more representation in what I was thinking of as an entry level professional. But we'll make the next survey better.
Yeah. We had to do a first one. This was a good first one. We get a lot of really interesting
Tons of
information out of it, some fascinating insights.
absolute.
And maybe it would be good to get into what we found. I mean, I'm really curious about the 3 tiers
Yeah.
in the responses that emerged. I don't know that we need to talk about, all 9 items that were on the survey, but more of what jumped out are at the kind of the bottom tier, are all of the things that I think 4 years ago, 5 years ago might have sat at the top, and things that we've really built our professional identities around in some cases. And then at the top tier, it was an interesting mix of things. So I don't know, how did we land on the tiers that we landed on, and what surprised you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was surprising that there were 3 tiers, because there was 9 individual items. Nobody was asking anybody to put them into 3 tiers. We said rate each one on its own on a scale of 1 to 5 in terms of how important you think it will be for your career, your specific job 3 years from now, within the next 3 years. And statistically, they came out as 3 tiers. Like,
Mhm.
so that's what's really interesting. So I will read some of them, because I think it isn't.
Yes,
Maybe we will get to all 9 quickly
maybe we
in
will.
some way. But the
Yeah.
top tier was learning strategy and design thinking, combined with, and I'm going to read them in a particular order, even though it's slightly out of it in terms of its numeric division, but learning strategy and design thinking. So there's a lot, many of these are not hybrid, but like combinations of skills, and they were intentionally written, A, to not have that very long list that we talked about earlier, but B, to ensure that they kind of represented themselves appropriately as either durable skills, technical skills, and then there's one exception, which I'll get to. So why durable and technical? There was a bit of a hypothesis about the way that AI tools are transforming our work, that we hear that the refrain that we hear, and my version of it is the CFO jumping up and down saying, if we don't get our entire team to learn AI skills, we're going to be disadvantaged, we're going to be behind, we're going to lose money. And the quick interpretation on that is, let's get technical professional development in here as fast as possible. I mean, you and I have heard it. We've been asked for it, right? Like that's what's, it's evident. And as you and I have worked with AI so much and been trying to figure it out and how it applies, I think we've been like, well, geez, there's a lot of judgment going on in terms of how do I use this output appropriately? How do I shape this content? How do I get the tool to do it the right way? And is that actually not quite a technical skill? Is that something that will last? Because it's actually this almost human to human thing. So that one of the hypotheses, or maybe I should just frame it as a question, research question, was how important are durable skills in this age of AI as it relates to technical skills? So the top skill was what I said, learning strategy and design thinking. And by combining those, it's a broader set of skills, but it was rated the highest. The mean rating was 4.48 out of 5. High. Not the next one, but within the top tier was stakeholder influence and strategic communication. I'm putting those two together in the top tier. The mean on that one was 4.39 because they're just such clearly deep, durable skills, right? Like I want my 11-year-old to understand design thinking and learning strategy for her work as much as I want a 65-year-old senior professional to be able to use those skills. Like they have lasted since the beginning of our civilization or whatever we want to call it, right? Till now, they're durable. They're persistent. The third one in the top tier, because out of 9, if there's 3 tiers, there's 3 in each tier, was AI tools and automation. And tools is a key term in that, because if you said kind of AI skills, as I was just referring to, a little too open to interpretation, but tools makes it technical. You have to think about it as the tools that you're using, and which model am I using, and am I getting the prompt right? And you automatically just kind of think about that more as a technical skill. By the way, none of these were labeled technical or durable. So nobody was thinking about that. We weren't prompting them, but we made the survey so there was that data to analyze after the fact. So because I said them out of order, it's important to note that learning strategy, design thinking, AI tools and automation, and strategic influence and strategic communication were statistically all in one tier. There was no way to separate them based on the data. We ran many different analyses. And even though AI tools was a little bit higher than strategic communication and a little bit lower than design thinking. So that's the top tier, which I think is interesting. 2 durable skills and AI is in there, but from a tighter perspective.
From your thinking and the conversations that you've had with the other folks that you mentioned a minute ago, are there any thoughts about why those things rose to the top?
Well, there's a lot more questions from this survey, right, than answers. So I think there's probably 2 things I should say, and I'll try to keep these tight so we can maybe talk about some of the other tiers. But one is we did actually have more senior people. The sample was not random. It was largely targeted, and we emailed everything from graduate programs to individual LinkedIn messages to people asking them to fill it out. So, but we definitely found the people that filled it out, maybe they had more time on their hands, who knows, but more senior people filled it out. More than half of the people identified themselves as senior. So as a senior professional, do you have more of a perspective that durable skills last longer? You've been doing your work longer and you've seen tools come and go, and you're thinking, I'm going to put myself in a senior professional mindset. Am I thinking, well, I'm 50, I've been in this profession 25 years, 3 more years. Like, I know I need to learn AI, so that's up there. But like, I probably am going to do really well with big picture stuff like learning strategy and design thinking and stakeholder influence and strategic communication, making sure I can express my ideas clearly, which are being put to the test right now on this podcast, whether I can express my ideas clearly. But I understand that it's important, so I would rank them high, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So why are they there? I'm going to then just jump to an answer to a question that you didn't ask, which is, well, why might there be durable skills down low,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
There was one, and it's facilitation and delivery specifically, because there was actually a couple other durable skills, but at the one almost near the bottom is facilitation and delivery. And I don't know, right? It's really interesting.
What can you remind me how exactly was the question phrased? Which of these skills will be most important in the next 3 years? What
It was
was the phrase?
individual. It's important I'm glad you're asking, because it's important to restate that. They were asked to rate each individual skill on a scale from 0 to 5 on
Yeah.
how important they think it will be to them. So the mean for facilitation and delivery is 3.66. So it's not unimportant, right? A little bit more important than not. In fact, all of these skills got above 3.5. So I kind of thought all of these were useful, but
Hmm.
the bottom tier was mostly technical. So 2 technical skills, you mentioned this at the beginning, things that I've literally built my career on in a very concrete way. Learning technology, parentheses, LMS authoring tools,
Mm.
and content development. It's been
At the
huge.
bottom
Both
tier.
bottom tier,
Hmm.
and both of those are in there with facilitation and delivery.
And
I
just
mean,
to be clear, this is not like people saying that these things don't matter. They're saying that in terms of the importance that it might matter to them or to, I guess, our profession, that they're slightly lower than these other ones.
yeah. So I think I named the top ones had means of like 4.48, right, or 4.46.
Yeah.
These ones had means of 3.7, 3.6. So it's a full point difference,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
statistically significant, but 3 out of 5 is still important, right?
Hmm.
So, and as a side note, you could have marked all of them 5. I think literally nobody did that. So people did rate them differently. Like in terms of the data analysis, the data was telling there was clear patterns in terms of where people thought these were important. I am going to throw you a curveball, though.
Do it.
Around 133 responses, we actually ran a partial analysis. And I'm saying that because we had it intended to get 120, and it kind of kept going, and we kind of wanted to understand where we were. I'm not enough of a data scientist to say whether that is a valid way of dealing with this, but I'm going to tell you something that's interesting. There were not 3 tiers at that time. Learning strategy and design thinking in that sample set, which was a random sample set in the fact that it was not the complete. The survey did not end and be analyzed on its whole. Learning strategy and design thinking was the clear number 1 at that time. So it remained in the top number 1, and numerically, the mean is still higher than all of the other skills. So it did stay that way, but whatever you call the difference, the statistical significance was not big enough to separate that tier in the end with 197. So it was interesting, right? Like, you can't use that data, but because it's not the complete set, but it was an interesting curveball that was at that time when I did that initial wave, kind of the single clear winner out of all 9.
Interesting. And so say it again. It's design thinking and strategy.
Yeah, learning strategy specifically, learning
Learning
strategy
strategy.
and design thinking. That's one skill. So, the best way to say it, and in fact, writing the report had its own challenges because each one of these skills is compound. I said hybrid earlier, but it kind of has this compound element. A lot of them has facilitation and delivery. It's a skill item. That's probably the best way to talk about it. It's a skill item, right? They're rating the item, which is a set of skills. So it's like the item that they rated said learning strategy and design thinking all in one phrase.
Another thing that came out in the report beyond the tiers, there were a couple things that I found particularly interesting. I think In the report, you refer to them as gaps, kind of interesting gaps. So I'm going to talk about those. I'm also going to add a little bit of my commentary before I give you a question.
Yeah.
So the first one was on storytelling and narrative design. This is one of the items. And this one was interesting because people rated it a full point higher themselves. So they personally felt that storytelling and narrative design was very important. But when they rated what they thought how important their employers thought storytelling and narrative design it was a full point lower. That's a lot. That's an enormous gap. And then in the second gap that I think is interesting is that it was data analysis and reporting, and it was the opposite. They felt like their employers felt like data analysis and reporting was a more critical skill for their work than they did. Not by a full point, but there was still a gap kind of in that other opposite direction. And so these kind of feel connected to me. You can tell me if I'm reaching, although I don't think we have any perfect conclusions here, but it does feel like there's a little bit of a link. I think that people who do the work that we do feel that storytelling does matter. It impacts the quality of our deliverables. It also impacts how memorable what we the learning is and how useful it is. Storytelling is so useful from that perspective. But maybe they don't feel like their organizations value it because it's really hard to measure. How do you measure the efficacy of a story as opposed to something that is not story driven?
Right.
And then, it's kind of the opposite with data and reporting, right? Very easy to measure, something that is certainly usually in many organizations demanded by senior leadership. And so it's interesting that in the self-reporting about where people ranked these things and where their organizations ranked them, it almost felt like a little bit of a critique about their organizations, right? Like our organization maybe is not valuing things in the right way. Right? That there is a mismatch in how we think about what is valuable in this work. What gets valued is what's easy to measure. I think this is we see this again and again. So I don't know. Am I onto something here? Is there something else that you feel or think about this, or that other people you've talked to have had to say about either of these things or both?
Yeah. You've nailed a couple of them. I'm going to use the 14 people. I keep saying 14, me included. So 13 other senior learning professionals. And there was a very quick and easy consensus that, especially from corporate L&D, but even workforce development, that if data and reporting was ranked a bit higher by the learning professionals that filled out their survey in terms of their perception of how their employers would rate it. So I just want to make sure everyone gets the kind of meta thing, right? We're asking learning professionals not only to rank these skills on 0 to 5 on how important they think they'll be, but then take those exact 9 skills and ask them to rate what they think their employer would rate them. Basically, would their employer rate them as high? And this is where they said from their perspective, the employers would rate data analysis and reporting as higher. And then in stark contrast, storytelling and narrative design was rated higher by the learning professionals and not rated by the employers. And I definitely connect them. There was no follow-up in this that connected them. And I'm even going to just tell you, pull back the curtain, which is, I think, the whole point of this episode, is when we did a lot of analysis to come up with these 9 skills and look at a lot of competency frameworks and job descriptions that relate to learning professionals in general, all the other ones show up, but storytelling and narrative design doesn't show up very often. So why is it in our 9? It's in our 9 because we co-founded a company that uses storytelling as a principle and as a framework for strategic communications, and we believe in it, right? We understand that this is an ancient form, that it's literally in our DNA in terms of the way that our brains can almost do a form of telepathy by transferring emotion from one person to another using story. So it's in there because we wanted it to be in there. That's like the only
Sure.
And we wanted to get some data on it. It's probably obviously a durable skill. I just want to mention that as well, right? Storytelling is something that you can learn the techniques of, but we're very much, especially when you add it to narrative design, very much thinking of it as a durable skill. that will last regardless of the technologies that you use. And then I just also want to say this: data analysis and reporting, people may be thinking of that if they're already thinking of these kind of diametric, durable, and technical skills. Data analysis and reporting may jump out as a technical skill, but if you start thinking about it, data analysis itself has a lot of things that are really critical judgmental skills, right? What do you see in the data? It's not necessarily Excel skills or Stata skills or Mathematica. It's thinking about what matters and how you get it out. So that's actually the only one that we call a bridge or combined. It's going back and forth between the two. And yeah, I think you nailed it. From the employer's perspective, ROI. What's the I? If I'm going to make an investment on something, right, I need to see what that is. Businesses have to have that. It's like a fundamental element, and storytelling is extremely hard to measure. I started joking around with this group. Could there be like a dashboard of the number of times you'd get goosebumps from a learning experience, right? Because like you're probably going to get goosebumps. I would easily say, from a
Yeah.
storytelling tool, right? Some unbelievably kind of crazy story that just gets you on the edge of your seat and gives you goosebumps. And if you had goosebumps occurring in learning experiences as a metric, it's this wonderful way to connect ROI, right? We're now measuring something, which is the efficacy of storytelling for engagement, right? You're transmitting these emotions via a learning experience. So that kind of stuff is fun to be able to think about, but it certainly makes a good amount of sense that learning professionals are very much interested in the goosebumps, right? They live for those, probably many of us. I do. And the report is the employer's bread and butter. So it's kind of not crazy, but it's also important to think about, and then yeah, brainstorm these ways to make those two work together is also really really interesting. I mean, you and I talk about this stuff all the time, but AI may now provide us ways to measure storytelling in ways that we never have thought about, right? Like, does the measure the efficacy of the storytelling in the course? Like, we might be able to assess that, create new models of understanding through LLMs that we didn't have before, especially at scale. So yeah, really, really kind of interesting. By the way, we did talk about the bottom tier. These two that we're talking about right now are the middle tier. So it's also kind of interesting that the ones that had the biggest differential between employers and learning professionals were in the middle
In the
tier.
middle.
The top one in the middle tier, because they were all very close in numbers in their ranking, was change management and organizational development. So yet another durable skill. So out of the top 6,
Change
4
management.
were durable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we have talked a little bit about AI, but we should talk a little bit more about AI.
Yeah.
In the survey, 44% of the people named something AI related as the single most important competency for the next 3 years. So on the surface, 44% is kind of the headline, but in the report, you pointed out that number is an umbrella. There's a lot that goes underneath it that could be hidden in that big headline number. So what is being lumped together in that 44% of people who say that AI is the most important competency? What does that mean when you dig in?
Yeah, there was a couple of categories and a really wide range of self-reported experience with AI, which would really color your ranking of those skills, right? I mean, people are in some of the responses were just saying, I'm building highly agentic workflows that are taking raw content from subject matter experts, doing initial analysis, matching it to learning objectives, finding the appropriate or creating the appropriate kind of graphical assets for it, running processes that create the AI voiceover and combining these assets and creating new learning material almost all on the fly with its own level of judgment. So some people are doing that type of work. Some people were saying, I am actively resisting all forms of AI, and I'm not using it, and I'm not gonna use it, and you can't make me use it. So that scale was present. So in mentioning AI, I mean, I'll take a step back. We had 3 open responses. We have yet to kind of truly expose all of that data because it was so rich. In some cases, entire job descriptions were being pasted in to make a point about either what they do or how they do it. People were probably also pasting in things that came out of AI and putting them into the survey. I think just the amount of qualitative data that came out of this survey compared to if you had done it in 2022 would be fascinating, because I think we're all dealing with a lot of content. Some of it may be SLOP, some of it might not be, but like it was a lot. People put a lot of stuff in there, probably because we're all kind of doing that with a lot of data, a lot of words these days. Really interesting. Really interesting. Another pattern, I don't have a number for it right here, right now, because it probably doesn't merit some more analysis, but AI was mentioned a ton in those open responses. So was judgment. Like literally just the word judgment came up many, many, many times. Really interesting on that, and how to preserve it, or how to get back to it, or how to help your colleagues have it when they're dealing with something in the output. So judgment, really interesting to see that word highly kind of within the mix at a very high rate in mixed in with AI. And then another trend with the open responses, just going with that flow for a minute,
Yeah.
is that we asked about learning professionals' ratings, and we asked about their understanding of their employers' ratings, the perceptions of their employers' ratings, and that appeared to be a trigger potentially about, well, in this open response, kind of, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us? People took a lot of opportunity to kind of draw what might be described as a general indictment of the learning profession. And what I mean is that people were saying, they're actually saying what you said at the beginning of this episode. They were saying, no, there is no clear answer. I am getting extreme pressure from this side, whatever the side it is, to use AI, to, in some cases, not use AI. Like, not, some organizations are still like locked out of the
Yeah.
tools, and probably those organizations have like good reasons, but that is still impacting them. So, and then there's no map, there's no guide, there's no, like, it does feel like chaos for people. And I don't think learning profession is all that different than a lot of other digital jobs,
I
in
agree.
that people probably feel that way. But man, did it come out in the qualitative responses. Yeah.
It's fast. Well, the 44% of people who said that something AI related is the single most important competency in the next 3 years, that's very mixed. I mean, it's dominant as a single technology, but we all know that it has this outsized place in our thinking, in our work right now.
Yes.
It's not even, didn't even get to 50%. I just think that that in itself is actually quite interesting. I would have expected that something AI related as the single most important competency would have been a little higher. But I think that tells a story. And what you just said is that there's this incredible loud disagreement about what it should be, let alone what it will be. And thankfully, I would hope that us as the humans who should be the beneficiaries of anything AI related should have a say in how it's used. So that people are pushing back. All right, this is how we shape where these technologies have a place in our work and in society. So I am fascinated by that. And just from a larger perspective, I would say in the last just weeks, from students booing graduation speakers to, the government pulling the best model in the world off the market with an hour and a half notice, to OpenAI finances being released, and it looks like they've lost over $24 billion in a year. That's billion with a B, by the way, not million with an F. So there are a lot of questions about the future of these technologies, the sustainability of them, how much it's going to cost us, whether people even want to use them. So I think that when this survey happened, which was really towards the beginning of this year, clearly there's a lot of that boiling right under the surface that seemed to come up in the survey itself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. I think there's a little bit of a section we kind of called it like the season in which we gave the survey, because the spring of 2026 in terms of AI was unique in terms of itself, right? There were like literally like vandalism acts happening to the leaders of AI's houses.
Right. Yeah.
There was, I mean, if you looked up maybe something like AI data center protests and you looked at that in 2025, you probably find some. But like in 2026, it's a thing. It's a major news story. It's in local news and national news, and there are protests and legislation and petitions happening all over in 2026 because people are saying they're making the energy more expensive. They're saying they're using the water, right? All of those things that it's important to think about the season in which a survey takes place, and it was spring 2026. That was not insignificant in terms of what we were asking and when we were asking.
Definitely. And actually, one of the open text responses, every time I read it, it just feels like a gut punch. So you said there was one place where people could just write whatever they want. And somebody wrote, quote, I feel like I'm being set up to fail in relation to AI, right? And so
Yeah.
I don't know, when you read that, like, what do you picture? What do you think that it sounds like what you sensed was a lot of that. That one person said it outright, but there was this general sense of maybe this isn't so good for us.
You know, it's interesting. I'm not sure. That
Mm.
quote stands out. The qualitative analysis is hard, right? Like people might say both in their answer. So,
Hmm.
right? They might say, this has transformed my ability to do stuff with learning experiences in a way that I've imagined for my whole life and is now finally possible. And I hate it. Like, and it's like, what is that answer? How do you possibly code that into a way that says like pro AI, anti AI, maybe? So we worked on a lot of ways to code various things, and a lot of it, I think, as you're seeing from the way we're talking about the responses, ended up being like they mentioned it or not, which is like the 44%. But I don't know, to be honest. You're saying like the indictment that I said it's of our profession, which makes sense because of how you opened this. There is no people have, there's great pundits right now, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
saying that because some people are like very pro this or pro that, saying you must do this to be that, you must do this to be that. Like there are lots of opinions you can find, but
Yeah.
expertise in terms of the long term effects of this technology, we don't have them, right? If you asked, I've been saying this, you've heard me say it a few times, but like in 1995, I was in college. People were saying like, literally everyone. You must learn HTML,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounded right at the time because everyone was saying it. And I did it. I
Mm-hmm.
learned it.
Yeah.
How much did I really use that? Did I become a web designer? No. I mean, my daughter came home from school talking about STEM and learning some coding, and I don't have any more citation than her STEM teacher, but her STEM teacher said 2% of the world is involved in computer coding. Tiny number, right? Tiny number. We think about it all the time. We interact with it all the time, and maybe the number is growing because I'm doing more coding or vibe coding to be more accurate. But it's interesting to think about how that relates to the skills that we will need, right? You're saying everyone's saying learn AI, but AI is hundreds of different skills.
Yes.
So how can we possibly know exactly what that is? I'm gonna pull out a quote, and maybe I'll even say who this is. It was not from the survey. It's actually from the follow up that I did with the 13 people. This amazing learning professional who has been involved in developing everything from technical high school programs to kind of statewide workforce development programs. His name's Diallo. Super intelligent, wonderful guy. And he said, one of my pieces of advice for people that I work with is to say, try not to use AI for something that you don't know how to do, more or less, right? Like
Mm.
don't jump off the cliff and do so and ask for something. And then we kind of got into the discussion and we kind of refined it to like, in terms of like content, it's probably a more accurate way of talking about it. And when we say that, we meant like, if you've never written a strategic plan for a workforce development program, right? Or or a program for workforce development, maybe don't ask it for one because you might not know if it's good, right?
Yeah.
But if you've written an element of one, or you have helped contribute a section of one, maybe do that part. And I think there's a lot of logic to that. But the area we both kind of agreed was an area that people are doing things that they don't have experience in and finding success. I said was building some automation between systems that I work. I want Google Drive, when it has notes updated from a subject matter expert, to put that in another place, maybe even move that content. And I'm writing app scripts that I never
Yeah.
would have attempted. And why is that okay? And it's because the result is binary, right?
Clear. Yeah.
It worked or it didn't work. And that gives me a safe place to do things that I haven't done. I think that's one of the reasons vibe coding is so exciting. A lot of us have spent a lot of time strategizing, and when you build something, especially between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m., and you're like, "Wow, I built it and it works," it's very satisfying. So anyway, I was connecting a lot of dots there, trying to.
Well, there's so many to connect.
Wow.
So there's one last thing that we have to get to. So the report ends by pointing at something we haven't built yet, which is a skills roadmap for learning professionals. That was kind of the idea going into it. The survey is not the roadmap itself. It's kind of a first round of questions to get us into that work. So maybe you could just say, what do you think the roadmap actually will look like if we were to get it right? And also want to just say, you can say it too, but we can just reinforce each other. We want other people, anybody listening to this who's interested in mapping out a skills roadmap for learning professionals, we would like to talk to you because this is something we know are going to take a lot of people to be thinking about and refining it as we go. But just what is that? What will that roadmap do once it's?
It's kind of interesting because if you think about everything we said, which one of the themes of this whole podcast, and I think the report of this episode of the podcast is no one has the answer. So I don't want to pretend. If you're going to write a roadmap, you kind of have to pretend you have the answer. So I actually kind of think about it as a roadmap to the roadmap now. Is like, if the roadmap that we're talking about, which is like, hey, these are probably the skills that we need to work on, and I don't think we have that answer. We have what people think. It's what learning professionals think in spring of 26, right, that they think are highly rated. It's probably going to change. I think one of the questions that got answered was durable skills matter a lot. That's probably something that's just worth being repeated these days. Durable skills matter a lot. And no, I don't think there's CFOs jumping up and down saying, where is our durable skills training? But maybe
They should.
maybe they should be, or there should be a version of it, right? And I'm sure there is a mix. I also don't want to, not painting all CFOs the same. They're not. They're people. But the ROI question that we talked about is critical. So what is it? If we think about this roadmap to a roadmap, is how do we keep our learning profession engaged and catalyzed? How do we convene them globally, locally, regionally? And I think, and I think you agree, break these sectors in ways that matter. My personal vision is that for all the time that I spent in all of these sectors, K-12, higher ed, workforce development, associations, my next project, my next client will benefit from that experience. And I think benefit more, and maybe not magnitudes, but benefit more than someone that may have only ever been a learning professional in higher ed. For what I am doing, for the way that I am strategizing, responding, and bringing together lots of information, evidence, and standards, as we always talk about, around what would impact the learning experience. Years in K-12 matter, years in teacher training matter, years in higher ed matter, but now a lot of corporate learning, a lot of association development, workforce development, those things that I have learned about, non-traditional learners, newly immigrated learners, like those are things you might not have found in a lot of higher ed, for example, and those experiences matter in being able to think about how to serve learners and get them the best learning experience to get them the best opportunities in their life. So if we break these sectors down, we keep learning profession engaged, we do better surveys, maybe we'll get closer to a roadmap, and the roadmap's going to evolve.
Yeah.
But maybe there's something like a cross-sector set of durable and technical skills that we could all use as a basis. Maybe that's one way to think about it. But
That's
Jason
great.
said, if you are interested in any of this stuff that we are blathering on about, like just send us, James at jackrabbitlx.com, Jason at jackrabbitlx.com. Just we're a little excited about it and about what's possible, and we'd love to be excited with you to talk about it. So definitely want to underscore that opportunity. Connect.
Awesome. Yeah, let's have the conversation. I really appreciate you coming on, talking about this awesome work that you've done, what we've learned from it, where we're going next. Thank you, James, for
Thank
doing
you.
this.
Rock and roll. See you soon.
All right. Bye. That's a wrap on this episode. If you found this useful, please subscribe and share it with a fellow learning professional. It's the best way to help others find the show. And if you want to keep the conversation going, we have two ways to do it. We have a monthly online AI forum for learning professionals. We also have a Slack community by the same name, totally dedicated to learning professionals. These are great places to meet more people who do the kinds of things that we do and make sense of the world that we're in and what's coming together. You can find the links in the show notes, or you can reach out directly to us at podcast@jackrabbitlx.com. See you next time.